So thank you so much. It's great to be with you all today. Um, this talk today came out of a very deep and powerful experience that I had recently. About 3 weeks ago, a, a spiritual friend of mine passed on. And the impact of my relationship with this man was very, very profound for me. And it made me really more aware of what it means to be a spiritual friend. And I think I just decided in that moment, this is something I need to kind of explore within myself and also share. And you're the ones I'm sharing it with today. So um, I want to just put this in context a little bit. And then I thought, well, I have to look and see what what is Jesus giving us in terms of insight and inspiration around spiritual friendship. So I'm going to hopefully do both as I explore this with you. So just to put a little context around this, 3 years ago, actually just about 3 years ago, right now in March, I was in India as part of a training with about 80 people from all over the world. And they'd broken us up into a small group of probably 20 to practice the teachings that we were going to be taking out into the world in this course called The Beautiful State. And at the end of the first day, the instructor asked each of us to find a mitra that we would connect with for the rest of the 9 days of our training on a daily basis. And we would practice our teachings with this particular person that was called our mitra. Well, in the Sanskrit, the word mitra, it's M-I-T-R-A or M-I-T-H-R-A, mitra, is a spiritual friend. So I was in the circle and kind of looking around, and I noticed a lot of people were friends and kind of paired up. And in the end, I ended up standing across from a young man that I had known because we'd been in classes together, but I didn't know him that well. I was about 25 years older than this young man. And he's a physician, lives in Texas. And I could tell he'd been looking around and kind of eyeing some of the younger women in the group, maybe hoping that they would be mitras because he didn't have a girlfriend. And I was very aware that he didn't have a girlfriend. At any rate, he was stuck with me, who was old enough to be his mom. Anyway, it turned out that we were just a magical pair. And we practiced together and we had a marvelous time practicing. As a physician, he'd done a lot of training and teaching, as I'd done a lot of teaching. So we had our own style and we just really flowed with one another. And partly because I was 25 years older, I began to really feel very comfortable asking him kind of deep questions about who he was in his life and what mattered to him, what was important to him in his life. At any rate, we parted ways after the 9 days and just kind of knew that we had a different relationship. We were spiritual friends. That was our relationship. And I didn't really hear from him for a while. And I think it was probably June, and this would have been 2018. He called me and he said, I have a tumor in my brain and they're taking me to the hospital right now. I'd really like you to pray with me. And so I prayed with him and kind of sent the word out to our community. And it turned out that what he had was not a good thing. He ended up with a racket-sized tumor in his brain that was glioblastoma, which is, for most people, it's a death sentence. They gave him about 14 months to live. Well, he lived quite a bit longer than that. You know, as they say, he passed away 3 weeks ago. But over time, this spiritual friendship, this relationship as mitras, developed in a very extraordinary way for me. And I think the reason I'm talking to you about this is because I think that there's a different quality of a gift that we give and receive in a spiritual friendship. And I want to really explore that a little bit with you. I found myself being very aware of my friendship with him as both someone who would pray with him, someone who would be very open to listen to whatever was going on in his life. And, sometimes it would be good news and sometimes it would be not so good news. And he would call me and, they found this and then I got this treatment and then it didn't work. And then it was just a very much of a roller coaster. His life was, constantly changing. We did a conference together where we co-created the leadership of the conference. And, he was dealing with his recovery from the radiation and the surgery he had. So I carried certain pieces of that. I traveled to Texas and spent couple of weeks actually with him, just caring for him and, feeding him plant-based diet food and really just being a friend in many different ways, calling his insurance company and doing things that I would normally not be involved in and just, if one of my girlfriends or something. But there was something about this relationship that pulled me into a different field of connection with my friend, with my Nitra. And I really wanted to explore a little bit with you what that was. And I thought, well, let me look at Jesus. Let me look at the life of Jesus and see what I see there that can really help me understand what was going on with my friend Eric, because it was a very profound experience. And I realized afterwards that I do have a lot of friends that I know in my spiritual life, but I only have a few people that are really my Nitras. There's a certain quality of that relationship that's different than anything else that I've ever had in my life. So I started doing a little just research and looking in the Bible. And if you type in friend and Jesus, what you get is that the Pharisees blamed and accused Jesus of being a friend of sinners. He was a friend of sinners. And so this is such an interesting thing. I thought, well, what's this all about? Well, if you think of some of the stories of Jesus, if you remember the story of the Pharisees bringing, Jesus is inside the temple, kind of in like an atrium. Outside, the temple is right there. He's there, he's teaching. And the Pharisees come in and they bring in this woman who's committed adultery. And they try to kind of goad Jesus to like, well, what do you think about this woman? We think she should be stoned. She did this. And Jesus is he's kind of messing with them. He's playing in the dirt and he's just looking down and he says, well, whoever hasn't sinned, they could throw the first stone. So one by one, the Pharisees start leaving. They leave, and the older ones leave first. Probably they're the ones who've, done the most of this activity. Pretty soon, there's nobody left. None of the Pharisees are there. Jesus's disciples that he's teaching are there, and the woman is there. And the interesting thing about this is when Jesus is teaching, and inside the temple, the teachers always were seated. They would be on the sort of same level as their students. When the Pharisees brought this woman in, they made her stand up. It's kind of like, we're just looking at her. She's just terrible. Well, what Jesus did was, after all the Pharisees had left, the woman is left standing there. Jesus stood up to stand with her and basically said, be on your way. He was not to judge her. Be on your way and sin no more. It was kind of a symbol of, yes, I stand with you. I'm with you. And this had such an impact on me, this whole kind of understanding of what it means to stand with the sinner and to be present to the fullness of the humanity within all of us. And I realized that was kind of the experience that I had with my friend Eric. There's a passage in Luke. It's Luke 4, verse 18. It says, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me because he has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He sent me to proclaim liberty to the captives and recovering the sight to the blind and to set at liberty those who are oppressed." And I realized that at some level, that is the experience that Jesus is inviting all of us into. And in my experience with my spiritual friend, my friend Eric, this was the kind of experience that I had. When we think about this idea of proclaim good news to the poor. There's this quality of being able to be fully present to someone, to listen from the heart, to have no attachment to whatever is going on with them. This is where, as in thinking about this, I thought it could be very difficult for us to have a spiritual friendship at the level at which, the deepest level possible, where there's literally no judgment and no attachment to how the other person is going to make choices in their life, how they're going to live their life. If I think about in my marriages, I had attachment to what my partner, the choices my partner would make. Same thing for our children. Oftentimes, we have a desire to control how they're going to live their life. But this idea of having this open-hearted, compassionate ability to be fully present to another person and to literally see them go through the changes that they go through in their life without having to give them any sort of advice about what they need to do, but to be willing to be in the fullness of Spirit's presence with the compassion of the heart. I believe that this is exactly what Jesus was talking about in this passage when he was saying, proclaim the good news to the poor. He was talking about holding a space to those who feel a sense of poor in spirit, where they haven't raised themselves up to the quality and the consciousness of the divine, where we're in that place where we're not judging other people for who they are, what they're thinking, where they're going, the choices they're making. This is lifting people up, not just from the poor who don't have a high consciousness about material goods, but spiritual quality. And this idea of freeing those who are captive is about people that when we're in this place of spiritual friendship, we're able to liberate and hold a place of liberation for people who have limiting beliefs, who are holding themselves captive in consciousness to think that things have to be one way, or my way, or the highway. That we have this quality of open-heartedness, compassion, and we hold that field around us, that we literally bring people into a place of spiritual freedom in their minds and in their hearts. This idea of recovering sight to the blind, Jesus was talking about that when we have this capacity as a spiritual friend, we literally bring light into those dark places in consciousness. We bring people out of darkness and that place of negativity. And this is, again, is connecting with those who in some field are blind. And his point about setting at liberty those who are oppressed, if we can be present from a heart of compassion without any judgment to those who are suffering from depression, they're suffering from stressful states of consciousness, we literally begin to set them free from the burdens of their heart and their mind. And this, to me, is really what spiritual friendship is all about. And the thing that's so powerful about this, I study a lot in India, and I've really come to understand more powerfully the body-mind connection and how powerful our heart connection is. And that literally, when we're able to connect from our heart, the resonating field of the heart, which the heart has 40 billion neurons. The brain has got 100 billion, but the heart has 40 billion neurons. And when we're able to open ourselves from a place of non-judgmental, where we're not limiting the flow of life that's coming before us, not limiting what we say yes and no to, but simply being present to life, that this resonating field of the heart connects in to higher consciousness, connects into the divine presence. And literally the heart becomes the intuitive lead of the mind. The heart becomes the brain's guide. And it's that spiritual consciousness of the heart that guides how we respond in any situation. Rather than having a reactive mind that's kind of trapped into survival mode, into that limbic system of the brain, every time things change for ourselves or for the other, we move into this expansive place of connection from the heart of who we are. And the heart then allows us to be in the flow with life. It doesn't mean that we don't experience challenges. Just like my friend Eric, he experienced extreme challenges, having to deal. He was a physician. He worked for the military. He saw hundreds of patients every day. It came a time when he no longer could work because his brain wasn't functioning properly. Part of his treatment caused him to become a type 1 diabetic. All of a sudden, his life totally changed. He had to deal with diabetes, what he was eating, and dealing with insulin. He had challenges up and down and up and down. And what I began to really feel as his spiritual friend was I could hold a resonating field of energy to be present, to listen to whatever was happening for him without having to have the answer for him, but simply to hold this space of consciousness. And it's literally true that the coherent energy of our heart resonates in a field of energy around us. It's measurable. HeartMath is doing measurement right now. Their organizations, the Global Coherence Pulse Project, is doing measurements right now to see how in the world, globally, the heart resonance, when the heart is calmed down, the heart is open and receptive, rather than being in this frantic place, that we move into a coherence with the powerful energy of the earth. And so I truly believe that just as Jesus was calling forth this divine presence, this spirit of energy within himself to be present to people, he was present to the tax. He was present to the those who were tax. What were they called? Tax people who tax. I don't forget what they're called. Tax collectors. They were really bad people in those days. People thought they were sinners. Tax collectors, to the people who were poor, the people who had no money, to the lepers, to the people who committed adultery. He was present to all of these people because he was present to all of humanity. He was not just holding the high watch for the people who already knew who he was. He was holding a watch for everybody. And to me, this is the huge gift that we have when we really tune into what it means to be a spiritual friend for someone. And in my own experience, I don't believe that this kind of depth of friendship has any boundary in terms of age. I knew that from my friend Eric. We were friends for 3 years. And there was a huge disparity in terms of our age. There was a disparity. He picked me up in Texas in his truck and immediately started talking about how happy he was that he had guns in his house. And I was horrified because that's not my thing, He had a different political agenda than I did. There were a lot of things about his outer world that were not like my outer world, but there was a deep, powerful interconnection that really served both of us over the time that we were friends. And I believe that kind of friendship cannot exist with anybody. It's not just an everyone kind of friendship. Yes, we want to hold values of being open and receptive, of non-judgment, but it's not easy to do with our family. It's not easy to do sometimes with the people that are closest to us. But having one or two people in our lives that we can just let it all out and be fully present to whatever's happening inside them, it opens us up to another layer of understanding what it means to be a human being on a spiritual journey. And I think that to me was the incredible gift of being Eric's spiritual mitra, of being his spiritual friend. It really opened up this resonating field of compassionate heart. It opened up an ability to truly listen to the other without so quickly coming into advice, so quickly closing off to judgment. It just created this quality of openness ability to see how the life of the other comes and goes, their high points and their low points. And when we can begin to feel that and to hold that within another, we have the capacity to do that for ourselves. And just as the daily word today was talking about forgiveness, this is a quality that we can think, we can hold it as a concept. But I truly believe when we deeply move into a spiritual friendship with someone, we have the capacity to experience what that means. That quality of giving something up, giving our judgment, giving our opinion, giving our advice up for this deeper connection, this connection with the fullness of spirit that is the humanity of another human being. And when we're able to do that, it allows us to begin to do the same thing for ourselves. For many of us, it's much more difficult to forgive ourselves. So I think this is just such an incredible experience to be a spiritual friend, to learn how to flow with the change of the life of another allows us to become more open to the flow of life within ourselves without that critical mind, that survival mind that makes us want to hang on to a certain way, my way or the highway, or our need to try to control what's going on. And for me, this is very much the teachings of what Jesus was talking about in Luke when he was talking about being able to proclaim the good news to the poor, to proclaim liberty to the captives, to see the recovery of sight for the blind, and to set at liberty those who are oppressed. This is what we're called to do in our lives for ourselves and for others. And the best spiritual practice that I've ever had recently has been to be Eric's friend. And, to see how the veil is lifted in that kind of friendship. I was thinking back, just as an aside, to another one of my dearest spiritual friends, and my friend Don knows her. She died at age 99. Her name was Krista Bingham. She was a Unity, amazing woman. And I think when Krista died, I was 60 years old. So there was a huge span of life that was between us, but the connection we always had was so dear and so precious. And I think that we have this opportunity in our life. So I invite you, let's just take a moment to go within. I invite you to take a moment just to feel into your own life. Feel into those dearest, sweetest, most precious connections that you have as friendships. Perhaps it's someone you've known for a lifetime. Perhaps someone you met when you were in school who still connects with you. Maybe not every week, maybe not every month, but when you do connect, there's something there that's so incredibly deep and powerful. There's a love that connects you beyond space and time. See if you can bring into awareness one person that you feel deeply connected to. And feel the way you're heard and felt by this person. Feel the sense of connection that you have. Notice if in your own heart, when you're either speaking or just thinking of this dear person, that you have no agenda. There's nothing you're trying to prove about yourself, about the other person, about the world. You're simply present to the being, present to the spirit of this beautiful person. Notice the timelessness of this relationship. There's no urgency about connecting. There's no shame to not make a phone call. It happens when it happens. there's a flow to the relationship. And when you speak, perhaps you hear some exciting news, some good news. Perhaps there are challenges for your friend. But notice how you're willing to just pause and listen completely without reacting, without making it more challenging, more difficult by what you have to say, but simply being present and holding the field of love and grace, a field of presence and compassion. So in this awareness, allow yourself to feel and receive the grace and the gift that is given to you through spiritual friendship. Even that friend who may have passed, you still get the gift of that deep and powerful abiding presence. A presence that connects you with the divine, with the God life within you and within your friend. And it expands out to others in your life, to your family, to your friends, to the people you work with. For this spiritual friendship is a gift and a grace to each of us. And it can become one of our deepest and most powerful spiritual practices. So I invite you to explore this throughout the next week. If you have someone that feels like your mitra, your spiritual friend, just be open in your heart to that connection without needing to do anything about it. But if you're guided, to reach out. And if you don't feel you have that spiritual friendship, allow your divine heart, the intelligence of your heart, to open to the possibility that there's someone out there in your world right now who would love to be your spiritual friend, to be your mitra. And send the energy out, set the intention from the heart of the divine that you would like to connect with this person, perhaps someone you don't even know, or perhaps a friend who's ready to go deeper in spiritual connection with you. Feeling the grace and the power of this presence, of this connection, of this compassion, this open-hearted willingness to flow with life and change, and to the power of love that is the presence of who we are. We say, thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you for friendship and for the power of spiritual friendship in our lives. And so it is. Thank you and amen. And gently taking a few nice, deep and conscious breaths into your heart, activating that field of 40 billion neurons that is a blessing to all of us. Feeling your heart and gently opening your eyes and being present back into this beautiful spiritual community. And so we open our hearts and minds to the power of friendship. And we trust and know that living spirit of truth moves in and through us as love, as we connect heart to heart, mind to mind, with those in our spiritual community and beyond. And we give thanks for the gift of spiritual friendship. So it is.